Hello, everybody. It's Professor Parish. How are you guys? I hope that you have been doing well these last couple of weeks in the class and that you're settling into my SIC, to the online course, how it's set up, and that everything is going well. So I wanted to make this video to go over the Paper 2 guidelines, just so you had a video to kind of talk about your options and things like that. One note is that you will probably notice on the videos that I've created that go over fiction and poetry and drama, you'll probably notice that those videos were created in a different semester. And the reason for that simply is that I like how I structured those videos, and not a lot of the examples have changed. So I know in the fiction video I did edit it a little bit and created a separate paper guidelines video because I talked about paper 1 in that fiction video and the dates were not the same. So I'm going to be doing separate videos about the papers themselves, and then the other videos that you can watch are all about the units that we're talking about in our textbook. So I hope that makes it a little less confusing. I know some of you may be like, why is she talking about spring break in this video? It's the middle of the summer. That's why. I enjoy the content that I put in those videos and the way that I explain them, and it's sort of like trying to redo something that you did well the first time. I don't want to redo it right now. That may change in future semesters. I may go back and redo it if I have newer examples. But for this semester, I hope that's not confusing. Alright, so paper 1, hopefully you guys have submitted that. The papers are probably the most important parts of this class. They are the most points overall. That's not to say that your discussion forums and your other assignments aren't important, because they are. This class is kind of a collaborative effort. But your papers are very important, so you need to make sure that you submit those papers. Now, I do let you revise them. I do let you revise papers 1, 2, and 3 if you choose to. It is completely optional. Some of you may get an A or B on the paper and be like, oh, I'm good with that. But others, if maybe you get a B or a C or even a D on a paper, you might want to go back and redo it. And this class is all about you growing as a writer, so I fully support you revising your paper, but it is optional. However, if you did not submit your paper the first time, you do not get a chance to revise it. That's just not fair to the students that turned it in on time. So make sure you get it in by the deadline, and then I will be opening up a revision drop box the week after to give you that whole week. I usually give myself a couple days to grade papers, so next week you'll see the revision drop box at the same time that paper 2 is due. Alright, so speaking of paper 2, I've got the guidelines pulled up here and I want to talk about them very briefly. So our second paper is about poetry, and I will state this a lot in the other videos that we do on poetry. It's one of those genres of literature that people either really like and enjoy writing it and reading it, they completely despise it and don't understand it and do not value it at all, or they are extremely confused about it and they're like, I don't understand it. So hopefully, if you're in the second or third category, this unit will give you a better appreciation of the genre, even if you don't fully enjoy it. I know it's not going to be for everybody, but hopefully our discussion will help you to understand what the authors are doing and why the poets write the way that they do and use the images the way they do and use sound the way they do, things like that. So, paper 2 again gives you several options. It just has to have something to do with poetry. So option 1, this paper is probably one of the most challenging for students who don't like to think outside the box. If you're a very straight-laced student and you just want to write very simple, concise papers, this one's probably going to challenge you a little bit. But if you can just keep your mind open, keep it open to experimenting, to new ways of analysis, I think you'll enjoy this paper. So, option 1, you can choose 2 poems from our textbook or from an alternate source. So if you don't like any of the poems in our textbook, but let's say you have a book of poetry at home, or you find a book in the library, or your friend has a book of poetry, and you want to take poems from that, I am totally fine with that. You can basically analyze them. This is the most vanilla or plain of the options for this paper. You can basically analyze 2 poems from our textbook or an alternate source and compare it and contrast them and show me how those poems are similar and how they are different. So if you picked two poems by Robert Frost. You could talk about how their themes are different, how their language is different, how the time periods that they were written in are similar or different, and just talk about ways in which they are similar and in which they are different. Alright, so it's a pretty straightforward paper. If you do choose an alternate source, like if, let's say, you have a book of poetry, you will need to do a citation in MLA format for that textbook or for that book of poetry. Alright? If you're using your textbook, then you'll need to cite your book. So either way, you're going to be doing a works cited page with this paper, unless you choose a different option, which we'll talk about here shortly. But that's option one. If you choose option one, you will do a works cited page, either of your textbook or wherever you find the poems for this paper, and it's just a straightforward analysis, comparing and contrasting two poems. So it is a more similar type of paper than what you probably did in English 121. Option two, and I'll scroll down here, is to pick two photographs, and those two photos, you create a short poem for each, and then you break down and explain how you wrote those poems and why you chose to write them the way that you did. So I have a lot of students choose this option because they have a lot of photos either on their computer through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, that they took themselves. If you use photos that you took yourself, you do not have to cite them in MLA because they are your own. You own them. You don't have to give yourself credit for taking them. If you choose to use two photos off of the internet, like Google, for example, if you go to Google Images and choose two photos from there, then you'll need to cite those in MLA. And if you have questions, I can help you. Just email me if you want to know how to cite those. But the idea is that you take two photos and you create two short poems, one for each. The length of those poems can be, and this is all below, and I'll go over it again, but the length of the poem itself only needs to be about half a page. Like, does not have to be a lot. Mainly, I'm concerned with you explaining your choices in writing your poem. So I want to know what language from our textbook, like meter, rhyme, pattern, iambic, pentameter, whatever terms you need to describe how you created the poem, you'll be using that in your analysis. Okay? So it's kind of like, instead of looking at two poems from your book, you're looking at two poems that you created, and you're analyzing your own creation. You're showing me your thought process and what you were thinking of, how you structured it, what your decisions were. I want you basically to deconstruct your own work and explain it to me. And a lot of students have a lot of fun with this. They like to write poems, and then they like to kind of break it down for me and show me why they did what they did and give me the analysis of it. And a lot of them have a lot of fun with this. I've had some really cool projects come out of both of these options, but especially this one here. So that is an option. That's more the creative writing option there. So, and then option three is that you will choose, instead of two poems from a book, you'll choose two songs. Because as we'll talk about in the presentation, songs are very much poetry. The entire genre of rap is rhythm and poetry. That's what rap stands for. So you could take two songs and analyze them, compare and contrast them, and then for both options 1 and 3, we are going to do a little creative writing. You will notice that it says for options 1 and 3, you will create a short poem that mimics or mirrors the style of the poems or songs that you're analyzing, and then you'll explain how it does that. So this is not a creative writing class. So if you're starting to hyperventilate, deep breath. It is not a creative writing class. I'm not grading you based on that. What I am grading you on is that you understand the songs or the poems that you chose, and you are able to mirror or mimic them in terms of their language, their rhyme scheme, their pattern, the terms that we talk about in our textbook for this unit, that you can mimic that. Okay? So that's what I'm looking for. And much like the poems that if you chose option 2, these are only going to be like half a page. Okay? So it's not like I'm asking you to write a big ballad or anything. I just want to see that you can understand how poetry is created, and you can explain that to me and show me kind of that you know what you're talking about. Okay? So obviously option 2 is the more creative writing centered example, and then options 1 is more like textbook no pun intended, poems, and option 3 is more songwriting. So it kind of depends on what your tastes are. All right. As far as formatting goes, the page length, this is probably the weirdest paper we have in terms of page length because it can vary depending on the option you pick. The poems can be any length, so if you want to write a ballad, go right ahead. But they have to be at least half a page. Typically, if you choose option 2, I want a photograph and a poem on one page, and then the next page, photograph, poem, and then no matter which option you pick, options 1, 2, or 3, your analysis is going to be 2.5 pages. So not the 3 pages that you've done for paper 1. It's going to be a little shorter, but 2.5 at least. 2 full pages and at least half to wrap everything up. You should have an introduction explaining what option you picked and what you're going to talk about. You should have your body paragraphs where you analyze, and then your conclusion. And then typically most students will put their poems and images either at the very beginning or the very end. If you chose options 1 or 3, they'll usually save the poem they created for the very end. But if you chose option 2, a lot of students will start out with their photographs and poems and then break it down in the analysis afterwards. So you've got a lot of options. It just is up to you how you want to format it, as long as it follows these formatting points here. The analysis part, the 2.5 pages, needs to be 12-point font, legible font, much like paper 1. But your poems that you create, they can be any font size, any font, any formatting. You can make it look crazy. I did a poem for college once where it was about the ocean, and so I did the stanzas where they looked like waves as it went down. You could do something like that. It's totally up to you. But the analysis should be very formal and much like a college paper in the 12-point font, double-spaced, legible, no bold or large text fonts. Please don't use Arial, large, bold, because it's clearly not 12-point. It's like 14-point condensed. 1-inch margins, double-spaced for the analysis. Formatting for poem can vary. If you just open up a Word document, it's already set to 1-inch margins. You don't have to mess with it. I just put it on there because sometimes students like to be creative and change their margins, and I'll be like, nope, I'm going to count off if you change it. But if you just use a Word document, you're fine. Grammar and spelling for the analysis should be like it would be for any paper. Obviously, with the poems, you can get a little crazy with the formatting. You have a little more leeway there. And then the works cited. Unless you pick option 2, you don't have to cite. If you pick option 2 and you use your own images, you don't have to cite anything but your textbook. Every paper for paper 2 should have a works cited page at the very end and should at least have the textbook cited. Why? Because you should be talking about terms from the textbook from our poetry unit. So if for some reason you've made it to this week, almost halfway through the class, and you don't have a book, you might want to get a book. Or at least you might want to come out to our campus, go to our library, and look at our book for free there if you don't have a textbook, because you're going to need it from here on in if you don't already have it. I'm assuming, though, that most of you have your textbook, but a couple people questioning, looking at you. All right. And finally, everything needs to be turned in on time for full credit. Now, the dates have to be met on full time, and this is for my 16-week class, not for this summer course, because we are on a tight deadline. So they have to be turned in on time. Otherwise, I'm just not accepting them. You guys have a whole week to do the assignments, 2 weeks to do the papers. Just need to be turned in on time. The thesis statement and outline for paper 2 is due June 24th at 11:55 p.m. And the final draft is due July 1st, right before 4th of July at 11:55 p.m. as well. And as always, you can email me, ask me questions. I'm in my office at the college Monday through Thursday from 8 a.m. to 4:30. So call me if you need to, or email me, and I will be able to check your emails and get back to you. Some of you have been awesome about getting a hold of me and asking me questions. Thank you. I would much rather you ask me a question than to wait until the last minute and be like, wait, what am I supposed to do? Ask me early, and I will get back to you early. Okay? So, otherwise, I know that for some of you, this is going to be probably the hardest paper in the class. Don't let it be. Have fun with this paper. This class is all about experimenting with literature and analysis. I want you guys to have fun and to write something that you are going to enjoy writing about. So pick poetry that interests you or excites you. Look at a variety of poetry. Poetry is just like fiction. There's so many genres out there. There's slam poetry, there's rap, there's country music, there's folk music that's poetry, there's Lord of the Rings ballads. The possibilities are not endless, but they are abound, and plentiful. So at the bottom, it shows you how I break up the point values and grades for this paper. Your intro and conclusion and your analysis is 10 points. The elements from our textbook, that's 30 points of your paper. If you don't cite anything from our textbook or reference any terms, that's basically going to be a 70%. You're automatically getting a C. So make sure you reference those. Creativity and effort is mainly your poems that you create. I'm just looking to show that you didn't just slap something together at the last minute, that it shows you did put in a little bit of time and effort into it. Grammar and spelling, of course, are 30 points. And then the page length and formatting, if you follow the guidelines, you'll get those 10 points automatically. Alright, so 100 points, just like paper 1. If you've got questions, email me and let me know. Otherwise, I am excited to read paper 1 from you all based on your topics. They sound so interesting, and I'm going to be spending the next couple of days reviewing those. I will make a note. Some students get into a habit that as soon as the paper's turned in, they're like, what's my grade? What's my grade? What's my grade? And you all don't seem like that type of student, but please bear with me. I am teaching multiple classes this summer. I have several assignments due at the end of the week for all of those classes, so please bear with me. I will have your paper back to you by the end of the following week when you turn it in. I promise. But just bear with me as I grade papers, and you should just keep checking my SIC, keep checking your email and Falcon Mail. You will get something back to you. Alright? But if you've got questions, let me know. Otherwise, I can't wait to read paper 1, and I'm so excited to see what you come up with for paper 2. See you guys.